Today's media compounds intellectually. It gets better and better and grips us more and more. The more you play the game, the more they understand your habits, the more they retain you. The more you watch TikTok, the better accuracy the content, the more they retain you. Books, radio, it doesn't personalize, it doesn't compound intelligence.
It's the most difficult environment we've been in. I'm not going to deny that. But I do think that it is possible to develop the right set of habits. And it's possible, and people do it all the time. Now, is our education system set up to help people with this? Absolutely not, right? So when I talk about this transition and I talk about the need to change everything, I really mean everything. Things as profound as learning and where learning happens. Look at Union Square Ventures. We have continued to invest in companies that are essentially paving the way towards a new way of learning. You know, companies like Quizlet and Duolingo and Brilliant and Skillshare and you name it. We now have a company called Sora Schools that's doing a new type of school. And why is that? Because the existing education system is not fit for purpose. It's an industrial age system, and we don't live in the industrial age anymore. So I do think we need to change everything.
Why is it not fit for purpose? Just because it's...
Well, because look, there's a wonderful book by a guy named John Taylor Gatto called The Underground History of American Education. Gatto was a teacher in the New York school system. And that book documents how we got to the system that we have today. A system that, you know, teaches everybody the same thing at the same time. We're treating kids by manufacturing date, essentially. And that's an industrial age system. You know, there's a wonderful quote, variously attributed, but education is not the filling of buckets, it's the lighting of flames. And that's what we've totally forgotten. Like, we are in a bucket filling system by manufacturing date, and that's not going to survive this transition.
So you mentioned like education there. You mentioned kind of politics earlier. You mentioned a couple of values in the book, which are really important for us to remember. You talk about the second value being responsibility, and you say, with great power obviously comes great responsibility. The quote, politically, Albert, we've never had such morons running countries. You know, I'm delighted that dear Boris is gone, but that was an interesting chapter. You know, you have Biden. Like, this is not a great time of great responsible leadership.
You can always choose to look at the sort of things that are not working, and you can also try and look at the green shoots of new developments, right? And so what are some green shoots of new developments? I was just in Germany speaking at a conference, and I basically spoke on stage with a young entrepreneur who is now, she sold her company and she entered German politics. We have a whole new slew of candidates that have been motivated by the lack of quality of leadership to go and run for politics. And so there's sort of one way of looking at it where you're like, oh God, it's terrible. It's only going to get worse. And then there's another way of looking at it and saying, look at the climate front. We have a new wave of climate movements that are much more determined than the old ones were, that are much more working in kind of a civil disobedience mode, and that's much more, historically speaking, much more likely to lead to success. So I think that it's easy to be pessimistic, and I have bad days, and on those bad days I'm very pessimistic. But I think there's also signs of new things. And then you've got far out things like biology and the network state, So there's a lot of, things that one can be unhappy about and pessimistic about, but there's also a lot of things that are promising and that are beginnings of transformation from within. That's like the example of this young woman, Verena Huberts, who ran for the German Bundestag and got elected and is now the vice leader of the party inside the Bundestag. So there's examples of that, and there's, examples of people doing interesting things outside of the system, like all the things I was talking about in education. What's happening in homeschooling today is it's a transformation of how people are learning. So I think you've got both people working in the system and people building new systems, biology's network state, etc. And so I think there's a way of, looking at the world and going, yeah, change is coming too.
Yeah, Albert, I told you to be more positive. God, just bring this negative attitude to me. I love that.